We believe we're live. So
Yeah.
welcome everybody. Lisa Senecal with Lincoln Square, and I am here with Simon Rosenberg, who writes Hopium Chronicles and is a brilliant democratic strategist, and you should really subscribe to Hopium Chronicles. And I'm also very pleased to introduce everybody to Susan Demas, who is going to be taking over the reins of Lincoln Square in about 2 weeks from today. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
It's good to be here. Congratulations to you, Susan.
Oh, thank you.
It's very exciting. I'm excited for everybody. I'm excited for the Lincoln Square community that Susan has joined, and for our staff. It's going to be a wonderful thing all around. So I'm looking forward to everybody getting to know Susan better. We're going to have a conversation, just the two of us, tomorrow afternoon. So 2:00, I think, or 3. I can't remember, but we'll send out an alert. So Simon, it is the celebration of the auspicious occasion of dear leader's 100th day in office.
Yes. Yep.
And so far things are just, he's doing a bang up job. Things are going really well. We have peace in Ukraine and in the Middle East, and the economy is thriving. So, do you have any criticisms you want to share today with us about how things are going?
Listen, it's been 100 days of failure, lawlessness, buffoonery, and betrayal is the line that I've been using. It's hard to imagine for things to have gone worse than they have. And Donald Trump is the worst president we've ever had. He is the worst leader America's ever had. And he's failing the country miserably. And it's a serious matter. I mean, we're sort of joking 100 days and everything else, but, not only has his polling collapsed, but we learned today that the economy shrunk in the first quarter. So he inherited the strongest economy in any developed nation in the world and turned it into crap within a few months. A hard thing to do, even if you had tried, which he did clearly try. And he's every day abandoning the constitutional order, stepping all over our First Amendment and due process rights and all the other things he's doing. The question of, I've described him recently as more of a saboteur than a president. I think it's far more apt to describe him. I don't like to use the term president because he's not acting as if he's the leader of a democratic country, right? And that he's acting like this with these sort of authoritarian fantasies that he has. And so, here we are, right? And, the most important thing for all of us, because those of us who are here today, we all know what a failure he is and what a betrayal he represents to everything that's made America great for all of our history. But what's important is the American people have figured this out. And that now you have clear majorities who disapprove of what he's doing. He has clear majorities disapprove of virtually every piece of his agenda, in addition to disapproving of him, whether it's the economy or immigration or his foreign policy. Go down the long list. There's majority disapproval. And I think one of the most interesting things I've gotten from the polling is there is a clear sense that he represents a danger to our democracy and to the constitutional order, and that people are really unhappy about it. I think the most interesting poll number I've seen in the last few weeks has been the Pew poll from last week, where 78% of voters said Trump must follow court orders. And, that wasn't 55, right? That was 78. And the other side of it was 19. And in polling, basically, and I'll end with this, polling, usually everything sits in the 40s and 50s. It's very unusual for any poll number to go into the 30s or the 60s. It's really unusual to be in the teens. And Donald Trump is now, doing things that are where he has the support of 15, 20, 25% of the country, which is a recipe for him continuing to drive his poll numbers down. And I do think that, what we've seen this week is that he's sort of stabilized in the high 30s, low 40s, his disapproval stabilized in the mid 50s. The big next test is going to be in a few weeks when the tariffs are, we start seeing price increases and shortage on shelves. and the things that we know are going to happen. The hurricane is coming. The economic hurricane that he initiated is coming. It's going to start hitting this country hard in about 2 weeks. And there's a real possibility that when this happens, he falls further, and his presidency is going to start to become seen, I think, as a failed presidency. And I know it's early to say that, but it's already teetering on that to a great degree. And by the way, I don't know what that means, right? We don't have in our system, like in a parliamentary democracy, the ability to call a snap election and bring in a new government. But, I think he has failed so profoundly in so many ways, so quickly, that it is shock and awe in reverse, And so the good news is that the country's waking up to it. The bad news is Trump is still continuing to do enormous damage to the country every day, and we have to act with great urgency.
Yeah, go ahead,
Those are
Susan.
my thoughts.
Yeah. So, in terms of polling, I mean, if Trump had these numbers in November of last year, would he have been elected? How bad is it for him?
It's really bad. I mean, Joe Biden at this point, depending on the poll that you looked at, was 20 to 30 points higher than Trump is now at this point in his presidency. And so Trump today has the lowest approval or highest disapproval rating of any president in the history of polling, going back to the 1940s and 1950s, even lower now than his first term. And remember, this time he got almost 50% of the vote, and last time he got 46.5. So he came in higher, and he's now lower. So and the thing is, the sort of severity of the drop is so incredible, right? It's just this profound, and it's all really accelerated after the tariffs were announced in early April. And part of what I think Trump, and we were discussing this before we came on air here, gang, is that, I think part of what we're witnessing with our own eyes is just how disconnected Trump is to the realities of what's happening to the country. And he says we're strong, but he's making us weak. He says the economy is booming. I mean, in the interview he did with ABC News, he literally said prices are coming down. Okay. Putin wants peace, right? Okay. He seemed unbelievably confused about the particulars of the Abrego Garcia case. And there were a series of other things that he said that were just, delusional. And for all of the criticism of Joe Biden for being kind of out of it and not connected to reality a year ago, what Trump exemplifies every day is far worse than anything Joe Biden ever did. And it's because it's on things that really matter, right? And I'm still I leave this week or these last few weeks, I watched the ABC News interview, and I will just tell you, we've all been watching Trump since 2015. His lack of connection to what's actually really happening around him was disturbing to me, in the sense that, like Ruth Ben Guyot and others have written about strongmen, is that part of what usually brings them down is they so get into their own bubble that they lose touch with what's happening, and then they make very big mistakes. And they don't really understand. There's no feedback loop, right? And there's no one also challenging them when they want to do crazy things. The tariffs are an example of that. When Donald Trump talks about the tariffs, the way that he explains what's happening and what is going to happen is completely unrelated to what is actually happening. And so I don't know that he actually knows what's happening. I don't know that we can assume that our president, our leader, actually understands what he's actually doing every day, or what has really happened with the Supreme Court cases, or what's happening with the economy when he claims that prices have come down, when that's obviously not true, right? And that's the thing that became most worrisome to me over the last few days, is that his public discussion of his 100 days is, he sounds like a madman,
Yeah.
and like somebody who should be put away, and not somebody who should be in an asylum, not in the White House. And I think the public is going to start figuring this stuff out too, because he says things like in the pressers that he did today at the cabinet meeting. A huge amount of the things that he said today were just fundamentally untrue, right? And people are living this in their own lives, and so I do. Just to conclude, is that I think that Trump is in a worse place than he was 8 years ago. And remember, in the midterm elections in 2018, we won by 8.6%, right? It was a huge margin of victory for us, one of the biggest midterm congressional margins in recent decades. And Trump is already lower than that. And I think that what may happen with him in the next few weeks is that he may not just have a majority that's disapproving of him, he may become irredeemable for a majority, and where there isn't any possibility of him fixing his presidency. And I was on with Stuart Stevens, your colleague, a few weeks ago on a talk like this. And Stuart and I talked about how after Afghanistan, Biden was really never really recovered, right? He had done, and that he said, with Bush, it was Katrina, that he never recovered. Trump is basically having the political equivalent of Afghanistan or Katrina right now, an event that it becomes very hard for him to ever recover from because people lose faith in his ability to be the leader. It's not like a scandal, right? It's something that is about his capacity to do the job, right, as opposed to an indiscretion, and which I think are different. And so I think that's why this is so incredibly corrosive, and why even today Speaker Johnson suggested that he could be open to doing something to roll back the tariff authority, right? Because they're getting really worried about how the tariffs are basically, blowing up their political prospects. Not only in current elections, right? We won in Wisconsin. We've been overperforming in other special elections, but they have a very fragile majority, and I think that Speaker Johnson today indicating that he would be open to legislation that could roll back some of Trump's tariff authorities was a major moment
Yes.
in them acknowledging publicly that this thing is off the rails and they're getting worried about it.
Yeah, so this is something that we've talked about before, right? That when the the polling starts showing that Trump is slipping, and it's been precipitous, how quickly he has just tanked. That doesn't just have an impact on him, and it clearly does because he's obviously destabilized. And he put a post out on True Social today saying this is Joe Biden's stock market because
Whatever.
apparently he doesn't know the difference between GDP and the stock market,
Yeah.
and which doesn't instill a tremendous amount of confidence that he knows what the hell he's doing with tariffs, since he doesn't understand the economy at all.
No, he doesn't.
But when you have polling numbers like that tanking, there are the courts are paying attention to public opinion. That really does matter. That's why marriage equality ended up moving as quickly as it did, because public opinion had shifted so greatly. And that the people who are going to be up for election in 19 months, they're watching the polling. And at what point do you think things have to get to before? I mean, I think Speaker Johnson is a really great indication of this.
Yeah.
At what point do they become emboldened enough because they believe that maybe enough of the base is shifting away that they can make it through a primary?
Well, let me just, for your viewers and listeners, let me just explain how this really works, because this is part of what happened with Biden a year ago, right? Is that everyone who's up for re-election in 2026 is they poll, right? Governors, senators, House members, state legislators, right? Statewide auditors, whoever is running, and not all of them are polling now, but they poll and then they talk about those polls. And the very first question is, Trump's approval rating. And then you've got the entire ecosystem of ambitious politicians who are wondering whether they can win with him at the top of the ticket, or is this going to be a wipeout like 2018 or other, sort of red, wave elections. And the truth is, right now, they're at a point where the likelihood of there being a blue wave is increased dramatically. They all know this, right? And so what happens is they just start, Trump's hold on them starts to weaken. It doesn't mean that there's a clean break, right? These things have to happen incrementally. But we've seen 7 Republicans came out for a bill in the Senate to roll back Trump's tariff authorities. We're going to have a vote tonight on a different bill that could where if we get 51 votes in the Senate tonight may vote affirmatively to roll back all of Trump's tariffs, and it may pass the Senate, right? This could happen this evening. For those of you who've got time, call your senators. If you live in a state with Republican senators, call your senators. This vote is happening tonight at 5:30, right? It could be a huge moment and a rebuke, a very formal rebuke of the president. And I think the way that I talk about this is that we're seeing the circle of defiance grow and enlarge. We're seeing more Harvard University, the Fed chair, right? The Chinese leader, Putin himself has sort of blown off Trump. You're seeing people becoming more defiant and having more confidence. And the way this works is the only way it can work is for these things to sort of incrementally happen day by day by day, where individual people are making decisions based on the perception of his strength, right? Which is this critical thing for Trump. And right now, he looks weak and like a failed leader. And it's not only the courts, that and judges who are making decisions. It's not only his colleagues. It's also foreign leaders who are also seeing this polling number. Xi in China hasn't given an inch, and they are mocking Trump. Putin has been mocking Trump, right? Foreign leaders are also assessing his relative strength and weakness. And so I think that this issue of strength and winning is like the whole Trump thing, because Trump is actually unbelievably ugly in so many ways, right? But what made him palatable was that he was strong and he was a winner, and with him you'd have a better life. And so when he starts looking like a loser and a failure, this is a weakling and pathetic, and like what I like to call him, a big blubbery baby man, right? Is that when he starts to look like that, what happens is then his ugliness gets amplified. And so he is in a dangerous place right now politically. We don't know when those breaks are going to come, but we only need to get a handful of House members, a handful of Republican senators to start structurally working with the Democrats to kneecap him. I think the chance of them passing his big, beautiful bill has diminished dramatically in the last few weeks. They just announced yesterday that it's no longer a Memorial Day deadline. It's now July 4th. We've all been in this town a little while. You know what happens when deadlines like that start slipping. It means they're starting to lose control. You've got 12 Republicans who said they won't vote for the Medicaid cuts. So, our work, and for those of you who are out there doing this work every day, and for your amazing organization, is that our work together is succeeding. We are being successful. Minds are being changed. The circle of defiance is growing, right? Even though Jeff Bezos capitulated again yesterday, other people won't. And what we have to do is we have to encourage that and make it more comfortable. The water has to be warm for those who are showing defiance to Trump, right? Because that's what happens. We're not only opposing him, but there has to become a rejection of his worldview, which is what the Fed chairman did last week. He completely rejected Trump's economic arguments in a speech that he gave. So I feel like we have made tremendous progress, that our work is being successful. We're obviously not anywhere near where we need to be, but I hope everyone watching today feels good about what we've been able to do. He's far weaker today, and we're far stronger than we were, but we have to keep going. And tonight there's going to be a very consequential vote. If 51 senators vote to roll back all of his tariffs, it will be a front page story in every newspaper in the entire world tomorrow that the Senate of the United States has broken with Trump and rebuked him on his central domestic, priority. And it doesn't mean that it's going to pass the House, but the only way this happens is we just keep pushing, and getting wins and putting losses in his column, and he becomes weaker and weaker. So look, I am weighted down, as we all are, every day by the damage he's doing to the country that we love. We all are weighted down by this, but I can also have a thing in my head at the same time that I feel like we are making progress and that we are stronger and he's weaker, and we just have to keep working as hard as we can.
So the midterms are very far away at this point,
Yep.
distressingly far away.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people are searching for the most effective way that we can keep this momentum going. On the Democratic side, who do you feel like is getting it right in this moment? Is it J.B. Pritzker? Is it AOC? Is it Bernie Sanders? Hakeem Jeffries?
Yeah, I,
What's the messaging that's really resonating? What are the tactics that, we need to deploy so that we can keep this trajectory going?
so let me give a very kind of hopium answer to that, which is that I think the way that I view our family is that we're all playing different positions on the same team, and that there is no right way or wrong way. There's just whether you're doing your thing or not doing your thing, right? And in some ways, and I've sort of accepted the idea that the opposition and the circle of defiance that's happening hasn't really been driven from Washington, right? As Cory Booker keeps saying, it's things happen to Washington; they don't start from Washington. And I think that I have become sort of sanguine and accepting, and even sort of enthusiastic about the notion that people are are not asking for permission. What's the old line? Is they're just going out and doing the work without being told what to do.
Yep.
And
Ask for forgiveness, not
yes, yeah,
permission.
yeah. Ask for forgiveness, not permission. And that this kind of bottom up, organic kind of uprising that we've seen probably will make us more successful and make all of our work more durable and resilient over time, because people they're not following orders. They're not being told what to do. They're taking this initiative to preserve and protect their democracy on their own. And so they own it. There's ownership, right? I mean, I love seeing in my community every day people self-report on what they're doing. And I do think these Tesla takedowns have actually been kind of a really major thing for giving people a step, because they're also joyous and they're not angry and there aren't people screaming, and it's not like a negative thing. And by the way, I also want to acknowledge that there have been millions and millions of individual people at all these events, and there's not been one incident that's happened anywhere in the country. It's actually kind of incredible, right?
Yes.
And hats off to everyone here who's been part of the protests and everything. But I will say that I think a lot of people are doing good work. They're just doing it differently. Bernie and AOC's job is different from Hakeem's job, right? In that he's got to run the Democrats in the House, and he gave a really important speech today that I feel was like him starting to really try to step out more. And I think obviously Chris Murphy and Maxwell Frost but I think that you know, more is happening in Washington and in the establishment party than is, I think, understood out in the grassroots. And I think what all of you should be doing, my advice to everyone here, and this is, somebody who's worked in Washington for more than 30 years, of all the activities that you do, and whatever you do, it's good, right? And generally, my advice is do what you like to do, because then you'll do more of it, and what you're comfortable doing, and that there's no one action that you take that is more important than any other. They're all important, right? But I do think these calls and the visits to the congressional offices are like the baseline activity that we cannot let up on at all. This stuff really matters. Cory Booker said that he went on the floor of the Senate for 25 hours, whatever it was, because his constituents demanded that he do more, and he was hearing from his constituents. I've worked with Democrats in Washington for over 30 years. If you can every day, for anyone who's listening, if you can make phone calls, emails, letters, contact your offices, if you have time to do that every day, you should be doing it every day. And even if they're Democrats, because what happens is not only do they acknowledge the calls that have come in, they acknowledge the calls that don't come in. They know when the pressure has come off. And so they feel like, oh man, we're not getting calls anymore. Like people must be disengaging. So, do whatever you're going to do, but try as much as you possibly can, particularly if you have Republican senators and congressmen, to make this contact into congressional offices something that you do as much as you can, if every day, if possible. And I think that stuff will really matter. And I think is what it's doing is that they're hearing from their constituents. What you're doing when you do that, by the way, is you're letting your elected leaders know what's expected of them now. And you're helping teach them about what it is that's possible for them. And so you're actually being a teacher leader in that regard, right? and a big citizen by helping. And I can tell you from the Hopium community, because we have thousands of people calling every day into these offices, there's no question that we have moved offices and members of Congress to new places because of this activity. And so, the way to think about it is not like they suck and they're not doing as much. We're in an unprecedented time, and we have to do our job as big citizens and citizen leaders of helping our electeds understand what's expected of them now in this unprecedented moment. And I think if you come at it that way, then this work gets really interesting, right? And you can call about a different issue every day, right? It can be Abrego Garcia one day, and it can be the tariffs another day. It's all up to you and what is motivating you, because that passion comes through in these calls and the contacts with the offices.
Yeah, I think the conversations that people are having just in their circle is having an amazing impact on how people are being educated about what's really happening right now. And I I'm not worried about it, but it's clear that Trump is already trying to dodge the impact of his tariffs. And I love your analogy of it being a hurricane coming, because the hurricane's already formed,
Right?
right?
No, we
It's
can see it. We can see
yeah,
it.
we can
Yeah,
see
yeah,
it, and we can do things that prepare for it and maybe minimize the impact, but it's already coming because the orders aren't placed and the containers aren't being filled and the ships aren't coming into port. So we're going to see this ripple effect no matter what the Senate does or Trump does. Things are going to get worse economically, probably before they get better. So, how do we continue to educate people to make sure that we hang this around Trump's neck, even if he decides, to find some way to capitulate to China and pretend that he won?
Well, there are two. It's a great question. There are two things I'd say about that. One is that this is why I don't really believe in the concept of what's the way that people talk about it. Sort of when you're talking to yourself, right? What's that called? I'm forgetting names. I'm a little tired today.
Internal
It's like,
monologue?
no, yeah, but I mean, like when we're all talking to each other, like we're in a bubble,
Oh,
right?
preaching to the choir?
Preaching to the choir. I don't
Yep.
believe in that concept because the the choir can't sing unless they know the words to the music, right? And so we are. I Hopium for me, and what I do with Hopium is that I'm teaching the teachers, right? I don't. Hopium is not about talking to swing voters. That's not what Hopium is about. Hopium is about making 150,000 people smarter and better and stronger every day, so they can go out in their communities and go do and become more effective and be better citizens and more powerful citizens. And so I think that one of the things is that number one is we have to do our work and be smart. And Alyssa Slotkin said this in her speech a few months ago that rather than worrying about talking points and talking about issues you don't know, spend time on the things that matter to you. That passion will come through in your communications with your friends, your colleagues, with congressional offices and so on. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but try to take one or two things that you really get to know really well that matters to you. I mean, think about the conversation you have if you're in a room with a Trump supporter and you can, how do you persuade them to move away from Trump? The way you do is by saying, I think like this is what matters to me. This is what's important to me about what Trump's doing, not the number one thing that's on the TV that night. And if you can say, this is why I'm disappointed in Trump, and let me explain, and the passion, the intensity comes through, that stuff really matters, right, Lisa? So I think that in terms of just, where I just got a little bit lost in where we're going, but I think that I do think that in terms of the economy, I think what people have to realize is that we will never be as wealthy again as we were potentially ever because of what Trump's doing. And this idea that there is like a light at the end of the tunnel or things are going to get better, they're not. He's doing permanent damage to the United States and to our economy. He is stealing the future of our kids and our grandkids. There is no possibility that things are going to snap back and be the way they were because our standing in the world has taken an enormous hit. There are going to be many consumers all around the world who buying something American will no longer mean what it meant before. Number two is that foreign governments all around the world now are going to start building supply chains and building an economic reality around the United States because we're untrustworthy. Number three is that we're losing our safe harbor, standing where, when the world got crazy, you could always invest in America. Well, now we're the crazy ones. And so
Right.
this notion that money and capital is just going to flow in here no matter what's happening, that's gone. And that's going to have enormous, what it means in reality for all of you is that money and interest rates now are going to be higher potentially for the rest of our lives because of what Trump is doing, and which will create slower growth. Fourth is that he's attacking one of the central engines of our prosperity, which is our scientific leadership and research leadership. That has, when I used to go out to Silicon Valley 30 years ago, it was common at Silicon Valley meetings for prominent people like Mark Andreessen to say the whole reason America has an advantage economically is because of government-funded research, that the VCs then take that research and turn them into companies faster than anywhere in the world. But that ecosystem of innovation started with government-funded research. And the irony of the fact that a Silicon Valley guy has come into Washington and sort of obliterated all of the research institutions in our science and the attack on academia, this is going to make America permanently poorer because of this. And so what we have to recognize is that this idea that Trump is selling, which, by the way, voters don't agree with, that, hey, you just got to be patient. My plan's going to work. Give me a little time. It is the biggest and most rancid lie of all of his lies, right? Because what he's doing is he's sabotaging the country. He's not creating a new way for prosperity. And so the stakes here, because of all of what I'm saying, are very high. And part of what motivates me to be here with you today and to do my work every day, I'm in my son, who's 24 years old, his former bedroom. He doesn't live here anymore. That's his painting of the cardinal over my shoulder. Is that, I'm doing this for them. And every day I get up, the energy, in addition to all the people I interact with every day, like you guys, right? We all give each other a lift every day. I'm doing this because Donald Trump is screwing the future of my kids, my grandkids, and I'm fucking pissed about it. And I'm fighting as hard as I possibly can because it's wrong and we shouldn't accept it. And, he's breaking things that are going to be difficult, if not impossible, to repair. And so that's why we have to continue to work with such extraordinary urgency every day, because we are facing this idea that somehow, he's just doing a new thing and everything will be fine. No, we're in a discontinuity now, right? Like we are and just one other thing I'll add to that is that America's never been more susceptible to potentially some kind of foreign event of a cyber attack or a kinetic attack, an attack on our homeland than we've been in generations, because we no longer can count on NATO and the European allies. And this idea that there's any version of our security where we are safer being outside of Europe and being outside of NATO as opposed to with them, it's insanity. It's as delusional as all the crazy shit he was saying, on the ABC News interview or that he said today. And so I think that my message to all of you is that, what is the impetus for him telling us that he's going to make America great again and that everything will be better under me and we'll be stronger and more prosperous and all this. None of that is true. And why it is that if it's what he believes he wants to be doing, that he's actually doing things that make us weaker and do harm to America and make us less safe and less free, when his argument is that he's making us stronger and better and greater.
Yeah.
And how we got to the point that he's executing an agenda that's so obviously damaging the country is going to be something we're going to be debating for the rest of our lives, because I think that I have concluded that it's impossible for me to believe anything other than Vladimir Putin has spent a lot of time working Trump over the last 4 years, and that he convinced him to pursue strategies that Trump somehow became convinced were actually going to help us when they're doing incredible damage to us. And I didn't even mention anything about what's happening with healthcare in the United States, the unraveling of our making measles great again, right? And all the things that Kennedy's doing. So I think that we have to continue to use our outrage, our horror, the terror, the fear, the anger, frustration, the unbelievable sense of betrayal that we all feel, and channel that into concrete action every day in order to give our kids and our grandkids some hope of having the same kind of opportunities that we had when we were all growing up. And that's really what's motivating me to a great degree every day.
One thing that I found really intriguing in your piece today was you were talking about we need to build up to a big action on July 4th. And I remember last July 4th, and I found it to be an incredibly solemn holiday because it was right after the Roberts Court had essentially put a crown on Trump's head and said, do whatever you want. The law doesn't apply to you. Um, and that weighed very heavily on me, and I think on so many of us. And I think kind of tamped down some of that joy from the Harris campaign because,
Yeah.
the gravity of the moment. And so how do we take that holiday back? How do we make it something for those of us who believe in the promise of this country, in democracy?
This is a great. I haven't, I don't get to do interviews like this very often, so this is fun. I talk to myself too much, right? And whenever I'm with you guys, you get good stuff out of me, so I appreciate it.
It's not
So,
hard, Simon, actually, but I appreciate the props, but
no, I'm just grateful. I'm just to be able to spew on like this, but thank you. My wife will be really pleased because it means that I won't be talking her ear off later today. And so yeah, I'll let her know. She'll send you a thank you note later. It's like walking the dog, right? You got to get them. Like, go walk Simon out there somewhere. So, I think let me just try to. I think that we have to. I think one of the great opportunities we have when we get to the other side of this is that in this process of getting to the other side, there are things that are going to happen, right, in order for us to win and be successful and to make MAGA something that's in the past and not part of our present, right? And I think that one of those things is we're going to have an incredible rebirth of the sentiments that founded this country in the 18th century and a reconnection to sort of why America was created in the first place and the decisions that the founders made. Because what's so remarkable about this moment is that Donald Trump, our country was built to create a world where people like Donald Trump could not rule over people. And it was this vast, incredible experiment, right? And that we all know, we've all studied this stuff, but I think we now know why, right? I mean, Donald Trump now believes that that he gets to determine how Amazon prices their goods, what their supply chains are, who they can hire, how they advertise those prices to their own consumers, to their own customers. He believes he's in charge of how he thinks he has the power to assert the way that every business in America actually operates, right? It's this wild delusional thinking about his power. And in many ways, um, I have some people here. I may have to jump out in a second, but I'll say this is that I think that on July 4th, it's an opportunity for us to reconnect to the Declaration of Independence, the founding of the country, and why we made a decision to separate from a mad king. And in that process of going back and relearning about why it is that our founders felt it was necessary to separate from a mad king, and what our founders called the abuses, injuries, and usurpations were the term, and that they wrote in the Declaration to let facts be submitted to a candid world, is that by going through that, we are going to reconnect to the reason why we have to defeat Trump. And I think that July 4th should be a very bad holiday for him because it's a celebration of ending the terrible reign of people like him. It's an anti-Trump holiday. There's almost no more important anti-Trump holiday that one could imagine than July 4th. And he's going to try to do his thing with his parades and his flags, and fine. We have to figure out how to use it to our advantage. And I don't know that it means that, we have anti-Trump flags at parades. I don't know what it means. But I think, like we've seen all this organic activity in community after community after community where people are determining their own, people should now, in your groups, if you're part of indivisible groups or political democratic groups or other groups, you should be talking now about how to make July 4th meaningful. And maybe there's an event where people come and read from the Declaration of Independence, and you have historians come speak. One of the things I've argued is that it would be wonderful if every state legislature controlled by a Democrat and county office and city council were to pass what I call articles of condemnation of Trump, where they introduced an equivalent of like a Declaration of Independence and list the grievances about what he's doing to the people in your communities, raising our prices, cutting our health care, right? Evaporating our rights and all the things that he's doing, to make it local and personal, and then to introduce that into the formal government, to the legislature, and then have a debate about these injuries and abuses and usurpations, and then to vote on it and to force the Republicans in these states and in these communities to come to terms with what their guy is doing to people in that community as a way of personalizing this. And this is part of actually how our founders created the revolution, which is that there was a process to have every local community in a country that was disparate, where moving around was not easy, right? To sort of own the grievances from, and the harms coming from the king, and to make them local. And I think there's a whole role for our local elected officials, and we're seeing it with the Democratic attorney generals. We're seeing it now increasing with governors like Gavin Newsom and Tony Evers, J.B. Pritzker, who've launched their own initiatives, right, to sort of challenge Trump in a very aggressive way. And that federalism is turning out to be a far greater bulwark against Trump, I think, than we all understood when this all began. But I think that every one of you, if you're part of a group, be thinking about how to make July 4th a really shitty holiday for Donald Trump and the Republicans, because we're back in a very similar place. Look, our founders did a pretty good job. We went 250 years without a mad king, or 238, 39 years, whatever you want to say. But we have one now again, and we got rid of the last one, and we need to get rid of this one too. And I think that we should use what our founders did, and the sacred words and the power of their incredible vision and their language and their description in English to animate and inspire us now, all these years later.
Yeah, Simon, I love that. That's such a great place for us to end today. Thank you, as
Yeah.
always, for being here and lifting us up and helping us feel inspired. And I always really appreciate how much you acknowledge the Hopium community and our community, all the people across the political spectrum, not just Democrats, but everybody who is coming together with the shared belief that democracy is important enough to set our policy differences aside and focus on this right now. We'll get back to the fighting later. I'm sure we'll probably all really enjoy it.
But those are healthy debates. I mean,
yeah, that's the good stuff. That's the good part of being in a democracy.
And if I could leave with this last thought, because we talk about this at Hopium, which is that we have to remember that we are Americans, and fighting for freedom and democracy is what we do. That's our job. And that's something that can bring us all together. That's been our job for 250 years. It's going to be our job, hopefully, for another 250 years. We're having a little bit of a bump in that path now. But Trump is fucking up and he's weak. And we got to be, now is a time when he's stumbling, when we have to be the most active and the most aggressive, because more and more people are going to be open to hearing our story that we need to tell. And so just for all of you who are watching, listening, work as hard as you possibly can these next few months. It's really a critical time. And it's just always I love being with you guys. And thank you. And Lisa, good luck in what you're going to do next. And
Thank
Susan,
you.
welcome to the family, and look forward to continuing to collaborate closely with you in the battles ahead.
Yeah,
Thank
as
you.
do we. Yes, thank you again, Simon. Welcome again, Susan, to this community publicly. We're going to talk again tomorrow afternoon. And Simon, I hope we get to talk to you again very soon.
See you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.